In 1838, a man named Charles Wheatstone developed a way, or stereopsis, of looking at, of showing depth in pictures. Sir Daniel Brewster kind of streamlined the work that he had done, that Wheatstone had done. And on September 27, 1922, a film called The Power of Love, they developed what we call 3D glasses. It's a way of taking colors, red, green, red, and blue, and showing depth or perception. It's a way that you can look at the same thing, but when you look at it through the right lenses, you get to see more. Changes depth, changes based upon your perception. It's what you see. I would surmise that perception is so important. An old man was sitting by a fence. A young man passes by in a car, sees the old man and says, "You got to tell me, how do you do this all the time? Just sit here and watch cars go by as you sit at this fence." The old man said, "What I do really isn't different from what you do. Tell me, how do you do it? How do you sit in a car and watch fences go by?" It's all about perception. One writer said that when the brothers of David saw Goliath, they said, "Goliath is too big for us to kill." David said, "No, Goliath is too big for me to miss." Frank Langridge says it this way. He said, "Two men look through bars. One sees mud, the other sees stars. It's based upon your perception." When you read the book of Philippians, you've got to understand that Paul is somebody who sees life not through 3D glasses, but through 3C glasses, because he sees Christ everywhere he looks. And based upon that connection to Christ, he completely changes how he sees his entire life. And I want to offer this challenge to you, that it may be that you need to develop that love with Christ, that you become so consumed with Jesus that you look at life through 3C glasses. I want to anchor down in the book of Philippians. Now, this is really part one, because to be honest with you, I was going to preach the rest of the chapter today, and by the time I got to verse 20, I was shouting so much that the rest said, "Wait, save us for next week. You'll be too tired to finish." So from Philippians, the first chapter, verses 12 through 20, looking at life through 3C glasses, part one. When you find it, say amen. Amen. Now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that's what has happened to me, has actually advanced the gospel, so that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to everyone else that my imprisonment is because I am in Christ. Most of the brothers have gained confidence in the Lord from my imprisonment, and dare even more to speak the word fearlessly. To be sure, some preach Christ out of envy and rivalry, but others out of goodwill. These preach out of love, knowing that I am appointed for the defense of the gospel, and the others proclaim Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely thinking that they will cause me trouble in my imprisonment. What does it matter? only that in every way, whether from false motives or true, Christ is proclaimed. And in this I rejoice, yes, and will continue to rejoice, because I know that this will lead to my salvation, and through your prayers and help from the Spirit of Jesus Christ, my eager expectation and hope is that I will not be ashamed about anything, and that now, as always, with all courage, Christ will be highly honored in my body, whether by life or death. The grass withers, the flowers fade, but the word of our God shall stand forever. I want to talk about looking at life through 3C glasses, and this is going to be part 1. Again, I would remind you that this book of Philippians is really a love letter from a pastor to a church. Now, Paul is not writing this letter while he is on vacation. No, far from it. He's facing an imprisonment that is going to ultimately end in his death. But he writes to this church, and remember, he talked about the importance of their relationship, how he thanks God upon every remembrance of them, always with supplication. That's asking God something specifically on their behalf. And then he gets here, when he gets to verse 12, he turns about his situation. And Paul says the way we look at our situation determines how we're able to handle our situation. And I want to say my desire for this congregation, my desire for each of you individually, is that you would become so intoxicated with Christ that you would look at whatever you're going through the lens of your relationship with Christ. Now, Paul apparently Paul hadn't heard modern day theologians who say that if you're a Christian, every day is going to be a good day, all is going to be well, that all Christians are going to be ballers, we'll all have nice cars and nice houses, and if we got enough faith, whatever we're going through, we won't have to deal with it. That wasn't Paul's picture of Christianity. Paul's picture of Christianity is this, that life is sometimes difficult, it is sometimes hard, but it never catches God by surprise. And if I keep my eyes focused on the right thing, I can handle whatever I'm going through. So as Paul looks at life through these 3C glasses, he says, now here's why I'm excited about my present situation. I am excited, first of all, because in my present situation, I have become emboldened. I'm going through, it's hard for me, but let me tell you, when I thought about that God thought enough of me in my present condition to use me to suffer for him, I got excited. Now let me say, here's a strange theology that Christians have. Every Christian needs to develop the attitude that God can trust more people on the stage than he can with suffering. Because who can't get up if you're gifted and everything is going well? All your bills are paid. You just got your income tax return check. And those of you who are getting them, or if you had to pay them, you made so much money this year. It's been a good year, and you're excited, or you're getting a ride in the new car. I mean, who wouldn't be said, oh my God? But how do you handle it when you're going through situations that aren't favorable to your condition, and can God trusts you then? Hear me now, my brothers and sisters. You got to be careful how you act when you're going through, because you never know who is watching you. And so what Paul says to us is that God has placed him in a situation, and I am emboldened, because here is what Paul says, and you can shout, it won't even scare me. Paul says there are certain lessons that you will never learn in the college of comfort. There are some classes that they only teach at the school of suffering. You don't learn how to trust God when all your needs are already met. I wish I had somebody just to wink at me if I'm in this house. You learn how to trust God when bills are this high and money is this low. You learn how to trust God when things are happening, and it's not always about money. Sometimes it's about health. Sometimes it's about a mental condition. Sometimes it's about a relationship. But Paul says, in difficult situations, I have learned to trust him, and I am emboldened because God thought me worthy to suffer for him. Do you know how many folk God knows? All of them. And God could have picked any one of them, but the fact that God picked me to be in this situation, that God thought enough of me. Paul said, here's what I've been doing. I've been tearing it up in here, telling people about the goodness of the Lord. Paul says, it's like God has given me. Now, y'all, he's going through. He's in jail. He's about to be killed. But Paul says, when I think about God placing me here, trusting me with this particular situation, I am so honored to suffer for him that I'm going to tell everybody I know. I'm going to tell everybody around me about how good. Paul said, I just been preaching. Y'all, now Paul could have had a pity party, and some of us, if we are honest, we would have had our pity party. We're like, Lord, woe is me. Lord, I'm so sad. I'm so hurt. Oh, ain't nobody never been through what I've been. But Paul says, even facing death, I'm here to tell you that even though my body is chained up, my spirit is free. I am free. Praise the Lord. I'm free. No longer bound. No more chains are holding me. Y'all, he's doing a revival. He's preaching to the guards. He's preaching, and everywhere he's going, he's telling the story. Here is what I want to get you to see. The next time you are going through suffering, God is not picking on you. God has picked you. You are not suffering because you did something wrong. You have been chosen by God, and you ought to consider it an honor that God would consider you worthy. God knows who he can trust. You know there are certain places you don't send certain people. You know there are certain places, there are certain people you just love, but you won't trust them in certain situations. If you are going through right now, God says, I love you. Now, here is what I know about God. I know God could change my situation just like that. But if he hadn't changed my situation, maybe I need to change me to handle my situation better. Yes, I'm broke, and God could give me money. But if he got me here, I'm going to shout about what I'm going through because I know he's working it out for my good. Yes, I'm dealing with a sickness, and I know God has medicine. I saw a lady touch the hem of his garment, and she was made whole. So he could heal me, but if he doesn't heal me right now, there's a lesson he has for me, and I'm going to stay here. It says here, you've got to learn that there are some classes God is teaching me. He's developing me. He's working it out in me. And what God is working out in me, he's working out in me. And God is working in me, and God is working on me, so that one day God will work through me. And I don't have the right to tell God when he's finished, Lord, keep me here as long as you want to. I don't need everybody. But I know some of you have heard the story about I heard that song, I told my storm to move. You can tell your storm all you want to, but I'm here to tell the Lord to keep me in the storm until I am what you want me to be. Because I am like Job, that said, he knoweth the way that I take. And Job said, when he has tried me, I shall come forth as gold. You don't get gold. When you dig gold, when you mine gold, it comes out rusty, it comes out dingy, it comes out dirty. Gold doesn't shine until it's been in the fire. And somebody here needs to know that I've got a sign on me that says under construction. If you see me now and you don't like what you see, give me some time. When God gets through with me, I wish I had about 7 people in here who say, Pastor, I'm under construction too. But when God gets through with me, I'll have some new power in my prayer. When God gets through with me, I'll have a new faith for the journey. When God gets through with me, I'll have a new testimony from my test. Paul says, I'm here in jail, but I'm emboldened. Paul says, I have been telling the story because of what the Lord allowed me to go through. But then, Paul says, my situation with the right perspective will embolden me. But he said, it will evangelize others. It's in the text. I'm not making it up. Paul says, because of what has happened to me, he uses this word praetorium, and we don't know if he means the building where the guards or the actual guards themselves, but Paul says, here's what has happened. They have heard the story. Just like there are some classes that are only offered in the school of suffering, there are some pulpits that only pain can build. If I hadn't, now Paul is in jail for preaching the gospel. He's made an appeal, he's on his way to Rome, and Paul says that if I hadn't been in this present situation, the people around me wouldn't have heard the gospel. Y'all, the guards are being saved. Because I would have probably been telling the guards something, but it probably wouldn't have had anything to do with Jesus. Oh, y'all ain't gonna let a brother be real up in here. I mean, I told them something about their mama and about their dad. So here's what he's saying. He's saying so the guards are being saved. When they go home, they are telling people about Jesus. Here it is. You see, there is a validation and an authenticity that goes with people who really know how to suffer. Because if you've never lost a loved one, you're going to want to talk to people who've lost a loved one. See, because when you really go through, you throw away all those little key phrases, let go and let God. I hear preachers get up and say, I know what you're going through. I hear people say, no. And I know then they really don't know. Because if you've really been through, you know when you were going through, you didn't even know how you felt. I don't need everybody. Somebody ought to help me here. Say, sometimes you felt up, sometimes you felt down, sometimes you wanted to, and sometimes you feel guilty for being happy. You don't know how I feel because I don't know how I feel. When you go through, you change how you handle. Now watch this. This blows me away. It's one of the hardest lessons, y'all. One of the hardest lessons I've ever had to learn as a Christian. But it revolutionized how I saw suffering. There are times when you go through that have nothing to do with you. There are times when you will go through suffering and God isn't trying to teach you anything. There are times when God will allow you to go through and you are not God's student, you are God's subject. That when you told the Lord to use you, God says, I'm going to let you get cancer. What did I do wrong? Oh, this isn't about you doing wrong. There's a nurse at the clinic, and he needs to know that I'm able to keep in perfect peace. And so I'm going to let you get sick so that when you go there singing about how good I am, he's going to want to know the kind of God you got. Now, y'all, this is the gospel for grown folk. Babies can't handle this. This is for folk who are real. God says to you, I'm going to let you get in a situation, but you got to remember I brought you here. You got to remember I'm keeping you while you're here. You got to remember I'll let you know when the time is over, and you got to know that you're going to be better when you go through it. I don't know who I'm talking to, and you've been telling God, I've been here long enough. I've done this. I've lost that. I've lost the other. But God is saying to you, I'm using you right now, and when I get through with you, you are going to be better. Can you believe that there are times when you will have difficulty and you are saying the right things, you're paying your tithes, you're loving everybody, you're trying to do right? I'm the only one in here going to testify that there are some times when you at least were trying to do right and it looked like everything fell apart and you were saying, God, why are you tripping? God, I'm doing the right stuff. And you know what God was saying? This isn't about you. that the kingdom is bigger than you. God is saying to you, here's what's going on. There's a brother who sits in the cubicle next to you, and I'm letting you have some difficulties so he can see the kind of God you have, that he knows you ought to be pulling your brains out. He knows last night you should have come into the office drunk, but instead you come in here talking about how good God is. God said, I'm not teaching you anything. I'm teaching you to somebody. I don't need everybody, but I need somebody up here to testify that it may be that I am not the student this time, I'm the subject. And what Paul is saying is, because I got on these glasses, I'm able to see that God is using me for his glory. Here I am in chains, and I'm teaching the prison guard how to be free. Here I am bound, but I'm showing them how to be liberated. Here I am, the men who are going to take my life, I'm showing them how to have life and life more abundantly. This ain't about me. The kingdom is bigger than I am. And I want the Lord to use me to his glory. So Lord, teach me how to see what I'm going through the way you see it. Sister had kept bothering her brother about taking her to climb. He used to always climb mountains and climb fields. She said, climb hills. She said, take me with you. So one day when she's about 8, he takes her with him. When she gets out there, she's like, oh, why? Look at all these rough spots and stones on the hill. Her brother says, if there were not for the rough spots and the stones, we'd have no place to climb. Somebody's going to get this shout when okay, I'm going to go Big Mama. We love to talk about I'm coming up the rough side of the mountain. People don't climb smooth mountains. I know it's rough, but I need a place to hold on. Every rocky spot gives me a place to put my hand on my foot. And here is what I know. Every hill I encounter, I get a little higher. I don't need everybody, but I should have had about 8 people to say, I'm coming up the rough side and I am higher. Well, this text says that not only did Paul become emboldened, that your present condition will embolden you. And not only will it evangelize others, those are non-believers will be evangelized. But you know what he says? It will empower believers. Paul says, now here's what really got me excited. Paul says, because I am in jail, people who have been watching me have just gotten on fire. Other preachers have said this, that because they have seen what God is doing in my life, they have become empowered. They said that if God can do it for Paul, he can do it for me. They have just started to tell the story about Jesus. I remember when I was in high school, I was a lifeguard. And I remember when they were teaching us how to jump into the water, they teach you how to jump into the water without going underwater. Now, I'm afraid of heights. I'll tell you that up front. And so I didn't see the need of going up, number one, on a high board to come down. And then I didn't see the need of jumping off a perfectly good board into the water. But I had a friend, his name was Kelvin Williams, but you know I'm from the country, kind of hood, so nobody goes by their own name. His name was Cat Moon. Cat Moon was a lifeguard, and Cat Moon was shorter than I was. He was lighter. Cat Moon wasn't afraid of anything. Cat Moon went up on top of that thing, and he jumped down, and he did the little move where they tell you when you jump in, push your hands down, and you'll stay up. I'm over here, I'm bigger than he is, and I'm a lifeguard too. And I say to myself, well, if it will work for Cat Moon, I ain't scared. I'm going to do it. Here is the jump that Paul says. Paul says that they see me in jail, and I'm still telling the story. I'm in jail preaching, and the jailers are falling out. Do you think that the people who were out, how they must have felt? I am in both. This is why you got to be careful when you go through. If you can't be a grown Christian when you suffer, get off Facebook. Get off Facebook. Shut down your Instagram. Because Okay, then. It's enough time for y'all be done forgot this by my anniversary, so I'm gonna tell you the truth. Amen. I'm sick of believers either finding ways to complain while acting like they're thanking God. Ain't nobody never had it, but I thank God I'm holding on with it. And I'm sick of believers trying to dry brag. You know what a dry brag is? No, you don't. Okay. A dry brag is when you try to make light of stuff that you really, okay, like this. Listen, I know ain't nothing much to me. I'm just a vessel that the Lord has blessed to have tailor-made clothes and a brand new car. But do you think that stuff matters to me? Oh, yes, I went to Harvard, but that doesn't make me better than anybody else just because it was a... So you know what a dry brag is, right? So I'm sick of believers trying to tell people, listen, and I'm sick of believers falling apart every time something happens. I'm sick of you acting like you're the first one to go through it. You are not. Everything you're going through, somebody else. So here is what God says. God says, if I trusted you to suffer for me, somebody is watching you, and you never know who has their eyes on you. So here's what I want you to do. You don't do God a favor when you go through acting like it's the worst ever. And you don't do God a favor bragging about how good you're handling it. The best way is to keep on doing what God called you to do. Paul isn't talking about I'm better than other prisoners. Paul just says I keep telling the same story. That means when I was out, I was talking about Jesus saves. He's the only way to God. But when they put me in, and when somebody saw Paul, the other folks started to say, I want to know a God that will let you have your mind stayed on him. But then, y'all, they came to Paul with this issue. They said to Paul, well, what about their motives? Paul says, listen, I'm not even tripping. You're not about, he said, the kingdom is too big for us to be competitors. There are some people who are preaching, and when they saw me in chains, they got excited to say, I'm going to do it for Brother Paul. But some people said, well, since Paul going to lose his congregation, there's a little place for me. I can go do it, and I can go get Paul's fame. Paul said, I'm not even tripping about what people's motives are. I'm more concerned about results than I am motives. Paul says this, I don't kick people out of the kingdom. I don't stand publicly and cut down other preachers who are preaching saying they need to do this or they need to do that. Paul says, all I'm going to do is keep on talking about Jesus. Y'all watch this. Don't miss this now. There are some preachers who will spend 40 minutes telling you why somebody else is wrong. Do you know why my children know the sky is blue? I did not take them outside and say, you know what, the sky isn't green, the sky isn't orange, the sky isn't yellow. I said, that's what blue looks like, that's what white looks like. And when folk know the truth, they know how to stay away from what's false. Paul says, preach, Delvin, Atchison, I am. Paul says, here's what I am doing. I am telling the gospel story. And Paul says, even if folk don't like me, if they talk about Jesus, that's all right with me. Because every time his name gets called, somebody else starts believing in him. So Paul says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hang on in this situation because it's going to get better after a while. I don't know who I'm talking to, but I'm on my way to my seat. I'm going to shout about 3 times. But I'm on my way to my seat when I tell y'all, you got to learn how whatever you're going through to say, I want to see it like Jesus sees it. My perspective is he's going to work it out for my good. And what is not right now is going to be all right after a while. You got to have that kind of conviction. That man, named a man whose name is Horatio Spafford. In 1870, his son, his only son, he has 4 daughters and a son. His son dies of typhoid fever. In 1871, the great Chicago fire destroys, just decimates most of his money. Even though he's an attorney, he has made most of his money in real estate. 1873, the downturn in the economy affected whatever little money he has left. So he hears his friend Dwight Moody is going to be preaching in England. He decides to take his family over to England at the last minute because of something that had to do with zoning. His wife and his 4 daughters go ahead, but he decides to stay. As his wife and his daughters are on their way to England, a ship on a ship called the SS Ardeville. Another ship, the Lockney, that's carrying iron ore, pierces that ship and the ship goes down. He gets a report from his wife, who is found 2 days later floating on a plank. All it says is saved alone. The daughters are dead. His son is dead. His money is spent. His wife is stranded. He gets on a boat, and as he is on his way to see his wife, the captain calls him below and said, "This is the spot where your daughters perished." Now, if anybody has a right to be upset, Horatio Spafford has a right. If anybody has a right to talk about nobody knows the trouble I've seen, Spafford has a right. If anybody has a right to say, I've been down so long, being down doesn't even bother me. If anybody has a right to say, I've been in a storm too long, I told a storm to move. If anybody, a man who's lost all of his children and all of his money, but he writes a song. He writes a song, and his song says these words: when peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrow like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. He gets to verse 5 and he says, God haste the day when my faith shall be sight. The clouds be rolled back like the scroll. The trumpet shall sound and the Lord shall appear. Even so, it is well with my soul. I don't know what you're going through, but you ought to have an it is well with my soul. It is well. It is well. It is well. Whatever. 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 Whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. And what ain't right now gonna be all right after a while. I don't need everybody, but I wish I had somebody to say God will fix it after a while. If you wait on him, he will fix it. I don't know how long you've been in the storm. I don't know how long your night has been, but weeping may endure for a night, but joy, 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 it will come. And so I'm learning to look at life through 3C glasses. In Jesus, it's well. Cancer, in Jesus, it is well. Child in trouble, in Jesus it is well. I'm broke. House is about to be evicted. Car is going to be, but it is well. I'm going to wait on him, because if you wait on him, he will show up after a while. Anybody here ever had him show up? When he shows up, won't he bring you joy? Won't he bring you joy? Won't he give you peace of mind? Hey, 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 it is well with my soul. It is well. In Jesus, it will be all right. And I'm trusting him to work it out for my good. You know what Paul says? Paul says, my outlook will determine my outcome. Because if my outlook sees Jesus, my outcome is that nothing separates me from his love. Maybe you're here today. I want to invite you to come into a covenant relationship with that Jesus who makes all things well. I want to invite you to come. Maybe God has been leading you to become a part of our church, and you just didn't accidentally come here today. You just didn't happen to come. It was no accident that the person who mentioned our church to you mentioned it. God has been leading you to this place. And he's leading you to this place because one of the messages, the overarching messages in Philippians is we don't do it by ourselves. We need to be a part of a community of faith, a fellowship of believers who help us to become all that God wants us to be. You know, there's some things you don't get at home by yourself. One of the things you don't get, is as Christians, we all got rough edges, but we keep bumping into each other to smooth them out. And that's why you need to be a family. So God can keep knocking your rough edges and you'll know where you fit in.